Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 128 of Album of the Day, in which today I'm going to be reviewing the new album from a New York pianist and singer-songwriter who has, pursued a, very successful career, playing jazz music and pop music and stuff like that. Ever since the release of her 2002 debut album, "Come Away with Me," which received widespread critical acclaim, as well as it sold tons and tons of copies as well. Released on the Blue Note record label, the very famous, jazz record label right there that she was signed to, has also picked up over 9 Grammys, which is a pretty big feat for a small jazz singer right here, as well as and besides pursuing a very successful solo career, she's been in a few other projects, as well as she's made numerous features on several artists' albums. So she's really had a very prolific career, pretty much, even though it's been about 4 years since she last put out a full-length album. I'm talking about the jazz musician known as Norah Jones, and I'm here to review her 6th studio album that was just released on October 7th, 2016, last month. So I'm finally gonna review an October album from this year, which October wasn't as fruitful as September was, but there were a few good albums in that month that I definitely would, like to review sometime, and this is the first one. The album is called Day Breaks, this is, as I said, this is her first full-length album as a solo act in 4 years, pretty much. So anyway, I'm just gonna show you the CD packaging, then I'll go into a little more detail about Norah and the album and stuff like that. So yeah, this is the CD copy here. Blue Note Records has always been a record label, and then there's the liner notes there. Produced by Norah Jones and Eli Wolf, co-produced by Sarah Oda, that actually is a co-writer on here too. And anyway, here's the booklet, which has the lyrics in it. There's over 8 original compositions on here, a few covers, and one song, that's written by a co-writer on here, and personnel there. And then there's the CD there. So anyway, that's the packaging for Day Breaks, the new album from Norah Jones. So to catch you up a little bit on my relationship with Norah Jones and her work, I do really like some of her work, including her first album, "Come Away with Me," may actually be one of my favorite albums of all time when it comes to contemporary jazz albums, from that very soothing, very nice voice to really to the jazzy, soulful instrumentals on that thing, as well as as well as the very sharp songwriting, even though Norah only writes a few songs on that album. Most of the songs on "Come Away with Me" are written by some musicians that have worked with her in the past, like Jesse Harris or Lee Alexander and people like that, as well as a few covers, on there, of Hank Williams' Cold Cold Heart and stuff like that. Also do really like her second full-length album, Feels Like Home. Pretty underrated album of hers, but I do actually really like that album along with Come Away With Me. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely do. I think I would put those two on my list of like my favorite jazz records of all time there. Not Too Late was the first album that featured Norah writing like all the songs on it with a little bit of help on there. And while the album wasn't bad, there were good tunes on it. I do feel like, it did pale in comparison with, her last two albums a little bit, even though it was kind of cool to see Norah put her songwriting juices to the test with that album a little bit. But lately she's been experimenting a little bit, starting with her 2009 album, The Fall, which saw her, hiring Jakir King to handle the production on the album, which resulted in a more accessible album right there and a much more popular direction. Which, again, the album wasn't bad, but also did pale in comparison. Maybe even a little bit more than Not Too Late did. But Norah Jones's last album, Little Broken Hearts, kind of fell through the cracks for me. And which has something to do with, she hired Danger Mouse to handle production on that album and worked with him on the album. And, he's worked with artists like the Black Keys, but I feel like a lot of the artists Danger Mouse has worked with, he's sort of taken all the guts and all the viscera out of in place for very pristine, very kind of, for some very pristine studio sheen. I feel that, Norah and Brian Burton didn't really feel like a very suitable duo due to the kind of lackluster songwriting and the kind of, the kind of polarizing, instrumentation on the record. So it's been 4 years since she last put out that album, but, she still has been very busy with her career. She's had a few solo projects. She's had a few projects here and there, like the Little Willies, El Magmo, and even a collaboration with Green Day frontman Billy Joe Armstrong, titled Foreverly, which was a covers record of the Everly Brothers album, Songs Her Daddy Taught Us. And she's had numerous features on like several albums, pretty much. She's had an appearance on Foo Fighters' album, In Your Honor, as well as like, tons of, as well as tons of others as well, like Willie Nelson, and as well as like Willie Nelson and whatnot, and also and Nelson, and even rappers Talib Kweli and Q-Tip have had Norah Jones as a featured artist on a couple of their on a couple of their albums, pretty much. But Norah Jones is finally back with her highly anticipated sixth album, which, seems to be getting quite the buzz from critics a little bit right now. Mostly because, which makes sense. I mean, I think this is an album that I think fans of her older stuff, I think, are going to enjoy. Mostly because she does sort of pay homage to her older influences and like go back to her roots here on this album. But it doesn't just simply but thankfully it doesn't just simply feel like her just rehashing it or trying to come out with another Come Away With Me. The ideas actually feel very fresh, and also there's actually diversity to the songs too, and the production and the writing's actually pretty top notch. So, is this Norah Jones's best album in years? Probably. I would have to say yes. Yes. I would say that the reason why I think this is probably Norah Jones's most consistent album in years. Is like she has never sounded this engaging since her debut, Come Away With Me. Not trying to knock her second full-length album. As I said, I do really like that album too, but, I do feel that, these sort of, very engaging and, just, very kind of, and, the just very ear-warming sort of, aesthetic finally shows up again here on this new album. And, she does bring on, like, a powerhouse of, and she does bring on a powerhouse of very talented jazz musicians. Drummer Brian Blade, organist Lonnie Smith, saxophonist Wayne Shorter, so she, as well as a few of her, like, live bandmates show up on here, like Pete Rem actually plays some organ a little bit on this album, too, and, and anyway, let's just, talk about the album itself, shall we? There are a couple of singles that led up to the release of this album. One of them is the song Carry On, which I must say that this song is an instant classic right here. Like, hopefully this song becomes like a classic for Norah Jones, to come pretty much. A beautiful jazz ballad with really nice, smears of, with really nice soulful smears of organ and piano, really nice jazzy drumming, as well as, is probably one of the best songs that, like, Norah Jones has ever written. Sort of very optimistic song about, like, how, after all is said and done, and we wonder, like, we wonder, like, who said the best, and were you the one, and, like, well, let's just forget it all, and, get it all, just leave it behind and carry on. But still, at the same time, it is self-aware enough, and her vocals give it plenty of emotional impact that it's, definitely, quite, intriguing right there. And also the really, the really kind of soulful, background vocals that pop up in, like, the second bridge of the song is really nice too. It's definitely a, great ballad right there. The other single is the song Flipside, which I feel does sort of take sort of the jazzier side of Norah Jones and the poppier side of Norah Jones and kind of puts it all in the blender, resulting in, kind of a, very catchy and very peppy, jazz track with these really punchy piano chords, din din and din din and din din and din din and it pairs really nicely with the funky bass line on the track, the kind of, sexy drumming, the very snazzy electric piano on the song, as well as these very kind of skillful organ chords as well. And the song sort of seems to deal with kind of this troubled relationship a little bit, where she just kind of feels it's like hard to find the flip side, and talking about how good things are happening, but happening kind of slow because she's reminded of this mystery from long ago, and like and she says, like, hard times, fine lines, moments pass by, and I cry, but still it definitely is a pretty smart sort of song right there. And I really like the chorus on that song too. I mean, Norah Jones actually really shows off some vocal power in the chorus, as well. And it's like really, catchy, and it's definitely one of the best hooks on the entire LP. Anyway, on to some of the deeper cuts here on this album. I feel on this album, throughout this album, singles or not, I feel Norah Jones definitely does, sort of play from out of her like biggest strengths pretty much. She does show off her smokier, sexier side on songs like the opening track on here, Burn, which kind of feels like I'm in this jazz club, like a local jazz club, and she's like up on a stage playing with her band, and like the room is has this kind of airy atmosphere that is infested with cigarette smoke and stuff like that, which this kind of atmosphere makes sense when she says stuff like, the plot begins with you and me in dark lit rooms, your cigarette cuts through, I wear it like perfume, as well as, the story never read is torn up in shreds, which she refers to like, pages left to turn are chapters we should burn. And the instrumentation on the song sounds really nice. From the really beautiful piano on the track, the very, as well as the very inviting, upright bass line on the track, I thought was really pretty, pleasing there, as well as this really gorgeous, kind of sensual soprano sax styling that is worked into the arrangement too, over the kind of sparse drumming and kind of atmospheric organ on the track. She also shows off this side on songs like And Then There Was You, or the song Sleeping Wild, on the song And Then There Was You, she definitely shows off some of the simplest lyrics that you'll find on the entire album, but yet they still feel very effective and still have enough emotional impact that it doesn't just simply feel like just a cliched, eye roller, cringeworthy filler moment or anything like that. And I do really like the piano and the upright bass on the song, which definitely sounds, very like, which sounds kind of slinky and really nice, along with the opening track, just like they do on the opening track, Burn, like over the kind of sparse drums. And then there are these really gorgeous string arrangements that show up on here, too. And similar arrangements show up on the song Sleeping Wild, which is written by Sarah Oda, who is like a co-producer on the album, as well as a pretty prominent co-writer throughout the LP. So it technically isn't a cover, even if Norah didn't necessarily write the lyrics. But, I like how the song doesn't simply, you can pretty much, you'd be hard-pressed to know that Norah didn't write this song or anything like that, because the lyrics on here are pretty interesting and do tie into the lyrical themes really nicely on here. It's sort of a song about how there's this person, in the protagonist's life that, she really likes and cares a lot about. But then eventually, when night comes around, they don't necessarily get along because, she kind of deceives this person and kind of leaves them sleeping wild a little bit. And I do really like the track. Even though it is probably one of my least favorite songs on the LP, because it does kind of end abruptly and it feels a little too short for me. It could have been improved. Maybe it were longer, or maybe had more lyrics in it or something like that. And the upright bass line on the song really reminds me of the song Cold Cold Heart off of Come Away With Me, even though maybe toned down a little bit, and it's sounding a little, darker here. I think. And also, there definitely are some, but Norah Jones definitely does have a few sadder has definitely a few sadder tracks on the album. She does come through with a few of the saddest songs that I think she's ever written, like the song Tragedy, which over the very optimistic instrumentation, which, it sounds really nice. It makes it sound kind of, charming and upbeat. Features lyrics about a guy that, had, kind of used to have kind of a normal lifestyle pretty much with, babies and a patient wife. But then eventually, but then we find out that really the only thing that he likes about being alive is like drinking or being depressed or singing all the hymns that he knows until he like drowns or something like that. So he like leaves behind the kids and the wife to, sort of live a life of solitude. So it's a very morbid, kind of dark vignette that she brings up in here, but I think it pairs surprisingly pretty snugly with the instrumentation on here, which features some of the best piano playing on the album, some really great layered vocals on the song too. Really like the organ on here that sounds kind of like a Southern Soul album from like the 1970s or something like that. And this is one of the few songs where guitars show up, and I think they do sound really nice on here over the very rhythmic, slinky bass and drums there. Like the guitars, do give it that true kind of, Southern soul flavor that I do like a lot, pretty much. Like, soul music is one thing that, seems to be a little bit of an influence on her first album, but I think it's even more prominent here on this new album. But, I do really like, that kind of flavor that she adds in there. Another kind of sad song on the album is the title track, Daybreaks, which, is kind of a song where she says, like, hopefully you find your way, because, it keeps raining in my heart, and in your heart, too. Wait. And, they're thinking, and these two people are thinking, maybe we should go away, if the love we have is meant to stay. So we can find the place to, and I want you to kind of find a place to call your own, and stuff like that. But, over this song is probably the most experimental and detailed instrumentation that you'll find on the entire album. There's a lot of things going on here on this track. There's piano, drums, a really nice sort of, a very nice kind of percussive texture on the bass line here on this track too, as well as this kind of drony, like, heavily tremoloed guitar riff on here, as well as these really nice string arrangements on here, as well as this kind of eerie, kind of atmospheric organ, as well as a weepy pedal steel guitar, and this soprano saxophone that sounds as if it's being played through some echo pedal or something like that. So it's kind of a, atmospheric, sort of eerie, almost psychedelic instrumental going on here. But thankfully the girl made it work, because I actually do really like the instrumental here on this track. It's a lot of elements, but thankfully it all sounds nice enough that, it doesn't all feel forced or anything like that. And like her vocal work throughout this album, I think, is really nice here too. Anyway, next I'm gonna talk about the covers that are on the album. The covers on this album, I think, are all great. There's a cover of the song "Don't Be Denied," which is a Neil Young song, which is kind of, more of a kind of an, folky, country tinged kind of, kind of alt country tinged sort of, track on the album, but she did a great job with this cover here, with the very very in the moment and cathartic gang vocals on here, as well as on here, along with the twangy guitars and the piano, and upright bass, and drums, and B3 organ, as well as I do really like the horn arrangements on the song too. They really do, suit the song really nicely. And of course, the lyrics, if you're a huge Neil Young fan, this song probably doesn't need an introduction. Because, yeah, you can definitely attribute a lot of good things to the songwriting here. The other two covers on here, it's more jazz-flavored instrumentals that have similar arrangements going on, but still both sound really nice. The song Peace by Horace Silver, as well as Fleurette Africaine, which is probably like a French for African Flower by which is a Duke Ellington composition with really beautiful piano playing, upright bass and drums, as well as these really beautiful long soprano sax solos. And what I do like about the use of the soprano sax here on this album is how the notes kind of shift from kind of low notes to very sort of to really nice and very cathartic and intriguing higher notes too. Like Wayne Shorter, I think, did a good job with using the soprano sax on here. Now, and of course, the only two tracks that I haven't mentioned yet are the song, and there are two more tracks that I'm going to mention on the album. One more song in here that I do like, and my least favorite track on the album. I'm just going to quickly talk about those before I head out in this review. The song Once I Had a Laugh is kind of a charming, grin-inducing, piece of goofy swing pop, but swing jazz pop, but at the same time it sounds self-aware enough that it still sounds charming, but not in a way that's cloying or obnoxious or anything like that. Just on here, I really like the very snare-heavy drums on the song, along with the horn section, along with that kind of bubbly horn section, which I think sounds really nice on there. Least favorite song on the album, I'm gonna go with the song It's a Wonderful Time for Love. The reasoning behind that is because I do find this is the one song where the kind of jazzy instrumentation, didn't really sound as memorable or as intriguing as it does on a bulk of the cuts here. Also, I find the lyrics on here are kind of chock full of cliches like "It's a wonderful time for love," "The sun shines up from above," which did sort of see me roll in my eyes, and it just kind of felt like just kind of a, it just kind of felt like kind of a, strange, just kind of, kind of strange, just kind of underwhelming, filler moment a little bit there. So that's kind of the one song where I tend to zone out at one point in the album. But really, outside of that, this is a really great jazz album. This album certainly does. This album certainly is some of Norah Jones's, best work in a while, pretty much. And, I can see why so many people seem to really like it. Seem to really like this album, like the critics and, whatnot. and I like how she was able to pay homage to her jazz roots, but but still make it feel fresh and stuff like that. Like it still feels very inspired. And it doesn't just simply feel like just a revital. It doesn't just simply feel like a revised version of "Come Away with Me" or anything like that. So I'm feeling a strong 8 out of 10 for this new Norah Jones album, Daybreaks. If you liked Norah Jones's work before, I definitely do recommend giving this album a listen because it's actually pretty great. And I'll see you for episode 129.